and welcome to the first ever meeting of the newly formed Art, Parks, and Neighborhoods Committee. I'm Paul Krikorian, the chair of the committee. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, the Honorable Ed Reyes. And welcome, Mr. Reyes. It will be good to be serving with you on this committee.
Good to make history with you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to be taking general public comment at the conclusion of the agendized items, and we'll begin right now with item number 1.
Item number 1, motion, Han Krikorian, relative to requesting the superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District to report on the feasibility of establishing green technology magnet school campuses.
This matter was simply a request for a report from LAUSD and its staff about the opportunities that are presented, both economic opportunities, the opportunity to develop new technologies, the opportunity to train the workforce of the 21st century in these industries. I don't think there's any need for a lot of discussion about that today, unless you have some comments on it, Mr. Reyes, or if there's, because we're simply requesting a report back from the district.
We just move it, yeah.
But if there's anybody here who would like to comment from the public on this or any other agenda item, please fill out a comment card. Do we have any comment cards on this item? Okay. Well, then that matter's been moved, and we will recommend approval to the council. That brings us to item number 2.
Item number 2 has been continued from June 14th and September 7th, 2011. Motion, Labange Wesson, relative to the Americans with Disabilities Act public accommodations compliance requirements for private business.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I'll just let everyone get a chair. Okay. Good afternoon. Lori Rittenberg from the City Attorney's Office. Part of the request in the motion was to ask the City Attorney's Office what it could do to intervene or to stop the practice of plaintiffs' attorneys from using predatory measures to go after small business, to target small businesses just to get a $10,000 fee and some accommodations made, which of course is a good thing to get the accommodations. But unfortunately, the City Attorney's Office, we don't have any standing to do that. What our function in connection with the Americans with Disabilities Act is to actually defend lawsuits from plaintiffs' attorneys. We have a lot of class action lawsuits in connection with emergency preparedness, curb ramps, sidewalks. I'm sure you've heard of some of those lately. However, I have 2 people here who really have a lot more information that is much more enlightening and could be very helpful. Angela Kaufman from Department of Disability and Iwa O'Neill from Department of Building and Safety could kind of talk about what they can do, what they've been doing, what they can do, and a lot of what they can do, unfortunately, has to do with, funding. They could do it if they had funding, but they can talk about that.
And if I may, just for clarity, because I think the motions, as I read it, seems to be directed at the targeting of private enterprise. And when you were talking about the city attorney defending cases, you're strictly talking about compliance by the city in its public works and public accommodations. Is that right? Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Eva, you want to go first? Good afternoon. My name is Angela Kaufman. I'm one of the ADA compliance coordinators for the city's Department on Disability.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Basically, the Americans with Disabilities Act has 5 titles. Title II is what oversees state and local government, which is part of what my department oversees with the city, and what the city attorney has just alluded to, that they defend the city when we are sued by the public. Title III is what this motion is really addressing. Our department doesn't really have jurisdiction over Title III either, because we actually are overseeing the City of Los Angeles' compliance under Title II. At the same time, we actually do have an information referral division that deals with the public. We do provide a lot of resources for the public, and that is available to businesses where they can call in and get some advice and some consultation we can provide, where they can get the information so they can make their businesses more accessible. There are some programs and some trainings that we could do. However, with the budget and with our staff issues at the current moment, we just don't have the staffing or the funding to be able to set any kind of program that could address small businesses. So that's the limitations that we have currently. There is a lot of information online that we could refer businesses to. There is information that we could possibly set up through our department's website or through the city websites or through your council offices if you would like to put them on your websites that could assist the local businesses in finding what their obligations are under Title III of the ADA.
Steph O'Neill from Building and Safety. Our department, Building and Safety, is charged with enforcing the Title 24, which is the state regulations for the disabled access. And a lot of times people mistakenly assume that we enforce ADA. We do not have any direct access that deals with the federal law. So we only enforce state law as it is charged in the building code. And we do best that we can. And a lot of times people that are litigated, they do come to us because, you know, obviously they sued, they don't know what to do. And we're very sympathetic. We do want to help them, but we cannot enforce ADA. So in other words, ADA, it's usually charged in a federal court or they can go in a state code. But our department does not enforce ADA. Something that we can do is help when whatever they do need to do and they are required to obtain a permit, we regulate that, and then we do streamline that. We try to help them with that, see what's required. We're sympathetic to that. As a matter of fact, right now we're trying to propose an ordinance that somebody is not penalized twice when they are being litigated because they don't have accessible parking. They come to us and we tell them, hey, you're not meeting the zoning code, go back to city planning. We try to circumvent that and provide a change in the zoning code that would allow us and give us authority to just give them the permit. So we do what we can. We're very sympathetic to the people that are being litigated, but because we do not enforce ADA, which stands for Americans with Disabilities Act, federal law, we only enforce state, our hands are tied.
Right. That was sort of consistent with my reaction when I saw this, that it seems like the city would have a relatively limited role in this. But I think what you've just explained to us today is informative, and particularly if there are ways that the council offices and other means of information distribution can be utilized to help educate our small business community about compliance, and do that in a way that will help them to avoid the litigation. I think that's a useful step to take. Mr. Reyes, did you have any questions?
Yes, not so much questions, but maybe some observations. When we work with Community Development Department and we have our liaisons with the federal government through the SBA loans, those are opportunities by which we could alert people of that vulnerability. Have we taken that step? Have we considered it? Or is that so detailed that it's not within your work program? I mean, it's something we need to assert, I believe.
I mean, you're talking about in terms of HUD loans we get and that we disseminate to, you know.
Well, in other words, we have moments in time in which we do interface with small businesses.
Right.
We know that there are
Yeah.
unscrupulous characters out there that are abusing
Yeah.
their position. So how do we protect folks
Yeah.
from being abused?
Right. My understanding is that every city contract, and I'm sure of it, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is the case, that every city contract has all these new standard terms and conditions for all sorts of things, for MeBee-Weebie and for certainly compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Right.
And I would think that anything the city issued, you know, should have that. And I can double check for you, Sal.
Can we double check that? Because again, this is although it is a federal issue, we have an opportunity to perhaps open up some eyes and make people aware of the nature of the environment that they are vulnerable to, given these types of unscrupulous characters that are out there just preying on people.
How should I communicate the response to you? Should I come here or?
Well, if I could suggest, because I think this is exactly consistent with what I was going to suggest, because the author of the motion is requesting a report to the council. I think if you come back and give a similar report as you just have given, except perhaps with some more discussion of what Mr. Reyes has asked about, perhaps some more suggestions about means of distribution that we might take advantage of with information that would be useful for our business community, it will be helpful for every council member to hear that and for it to be on Channel 35 so that we disseminate more of this information
Plus,
that way.
back
So
to council.
I was going to suggest that we advance this forward for a, report, a full report to council on
And
this.
every council office has a website. There's a link. There's ways in which people can be informed. And just, again, I don't believe the nature of this act is so heinous in some cases that people need to know how to protect themselves. So
Yeah, and also, you know, just on the city website, the main page has if you look at it has all the different categories, and if you click on for business, I don't know if that's if there's any ADA reference to there, but that would be a good place too, for businesses. You know, it's right there, it's on the top page there.
But I see you're acknowledging the fact that maybe it's something we need to add.
We need to add that? Okay.
Okay.
When I was a member of the legislature, one of the things that we organized in my office was a business town hall to deal with this specific issue. And the idea was that it creates a win-win, because if you encourage compliance, it's good for the businesses because they avoid these nuisance lawsuits and the oppressive kind of harassment that some of these shady law firms engage in, number one. But number two, it provides greater access to our disabled community because businesses are being brought into compliance. So I think this is an important thing. Let's bring it back to council, and I think it will be helpful for the members to hear what we might still be able to do to provide more information.
And just add, there was a program that our department was involved in years ago that I think kind of fell off just because of funding and staffing issues, and it was trying to actually do something similar to the ABCs with the food industry, and to actually give businesses, grades, and to get them to be more compliant and more disability friendly, so that the community knew where to go and they didn't have to have all of these frustrations. Because while we have one set of unscrupulous people who are going out there, we do have a group of individuals who are very frustrated and who are not getting services and are having difficulties accessing businesses on a daily basis. So trying to, shorten that divide a little bit and trying to make the city a little bit more accessible, getting businesses to understand that the disability community does bring a lot of economic relief to their businesses, I think would be a great program for the city to help support.
Well, thank you very much for your input. That will be if that's okay with you,
Yes,
Mr. Reyes, we'll go ahead and recommend approval of the report back to the full council. And thank you very much for being here. and
Thank you for
your
your hard work.
That brings us to item number 3.
Item 3, communication from Council District 5 in response to motion, Corretz Reyes, relative to requesting action in connection with clearing Quimby conditions, including entering into a 3-party agreement between the City, County of Los Angeles, and the developer for a 264-unit project at 12629 and 12729 West Riverside Drive for the construction of the adjacent River Greenway Park.
And who will be reporting on this? Do we have someone here to report on? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. Daryl Fordham from the Department of Recreation and Parks. Just to briefly update you on this item, which I know has come before the Plum Committee prior. The department on September 7th, staff gave a presentation to the board about the proposed project and the proposed tri-party agreement, just briefing them essentially on the concept and getting the board's conceptual approval so that the staff working with the city attorney's office can continue to negotiate and work on the proposed tri-party agreement. At the point when the tri-party agreement is prepared and ready to go, staff will be bringing that back to the board for their consideration and approval of that agreement.
Great. Well, Mr. Reyes, this is one of those unusual times when you and I have both heard this matter in committee.
Deja vu.
So thank you for the update, and we'll go ahead and recommend that it be
Let's go.
that we move this forward.
All right.
Mr. Chair, are we approving this per the August 5th, 2011 communication from Councilmember Koretz as far as the recommendations for action? Or-
Is that consistent with the Plum report? I'm not,
Fortunately, we have no report from Plum in file here on this particular matter.
If I
that
recall
would- that came
correctly,
in after the Plum committee heard it.
right.
Okay.
If I recall correctly, Mr. Ford, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I think they came about with a agreement that allowed them to reach their objectives, and the county was part of that agreement, the city and the property owner. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And so they were able to look at the loose ends that were demonstrated in Plum Committee based on the follow-up activity that occurred after the committee.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so then the recommendations would, okay, now I'm a little unclear, because this letter was the letter from Mr. Kretz was August 5th. Didn't we hear it in Plum prior to that?
Because the other item we have in file was dated August 9th, 2011, submitted in Plum from the Department of Recreation and Parks, and there's no recommendations in this particular report, so we'll also have to proceed here on an approval.
Have you seen the file from Rec and Parks? Have you seen the file submitted to the clerk?
I don't have the file in front of me, no.
You haven't reviewed it yet? I want to make sure whatever we pass is consistent with was our previous action. I think that's what we're right now a little doubtful. Do you mind looking at the file to make sure it's consistent? So I hate to put in contradictory reports and one committee with two members of the same. That'll be a first too.
So what I have here, just to be clear, is an August 5th letter from Mr. Koretz's office that includes 3 recommendations. Is that what you're referring to?
That's what we have in the
Okay, so the
file.
recommendations are to direct the Department of Rec and Parks, with the assistance of the Department of City Planning and the Office of the City Attorney, to enter into a 3-party agreement with the developer, County of Los Angeles and City of Los Angeles, for the development of the park. 2, to direct the Department of City Planning to clear the Quimby conditions pursuant to the agreement. And 3, to authorize the CLA to make any technical corrections or clarifications to the above instructions in order to effectuate the intent of the motion. I think that's consistent with everything that we considered, Mr. Reyes and Plum, and so if that's consistent with your understanding as
That's
well.
consistent, and
then-
of course, as I said, we're on the first of those 3, working to get the agreement done and get it before our board so that we can have those conditions cleared if it's approved by the board and then move through the process.
All right, then without objection, that would be the direction of this committee as well.
Right.
By the way, since we're closing in on the end, if anybody else would like to fill out a comment card either on agendized items or for general public comment, please fill one out and bring it forward. Okay, that brings us to item number 4.
Item number 4, CEO report relative to proposed amendment to supplemental agreement number 1 to contract 3027 with EPD Design, Inc. for associated landscape architectural design services in connection with the Sheldon Arleta Park project. It's a time limit file, last day for council action, November 8th, 2011.
Good afternoon, council members. Delilah Pucho with the CAO. The proposed is a First Amendment with EPT Design for as-needed landscape architectural design services. The consultant has been working on the Sheldon Arleta Park project. The project has been delayed due to construction shortfalls and delayed for construction orders. The department reports that the services of the consultant are needed past the current term, which expires in September 2012. The proposed amendment would extend the term by 5 years from 11 years to 16 years, which expires in September 2017, and increase the maximum allowable compensation by $500,000 from $1.1 million to $1.6 million. The proposed amendment would also allow the consultant to continue working on all remaining phases of the project. This office recommends that council approve and authorize the President and Secretary of Board of Recreation to execute the proposed amendment with EPT Design. Funding is available from various department special funds. There is no impact on the general fund, Pursuant to Ad Code Section 10.5, council has 60 days to act, otherwise the contract is deemed approved.
Okay, so the contract was originally entered into in 2001 with an expiration of 2012.
No, this is a second amendment, I believe.
It's the Second Amendment, okay.
Well, actually,
Yeah, you're right. First Amendment was in 2004.
and there was a name change on October 6, 2004. They originally were Landscape, I believe EPT Landscape, and there was a amendment that was executed which extended the term and increased the compensation by $600,000.
That was in 2009, and then we're now extending another 5 years. Why? I guess the first question is, why are we granting such long extensions to this single contractor without renewing the RFP or otherwise, putting it out?
Actually, in our last report with the amendment, the CAO recommended that the department go out for RFP. They did not go out for RFP, and they report due to staffing limitation and cutbacks, they weren't able to do that. As a result, I've stressed with them the importance of this, and one of the recommendations in this report on page 2, I stress that if they continue to need the services beyond this current expiration that we propose, they will need to go out for RFP, even though there's staffing limitations. I don't want to stop the project because they're in the middle of the project. Once this project is complete, if they need further landscape services for other projects, this office will again recommend that the department goes out to RFP.
Okay, and why is it that a 5-year extension is necessary at this point? I understand there were construction delays, but that still seems like a very long period of time for an extension.
I believe there's department reps here to answer that, but
Great.
from my understanding, that was the timeline they gave for the implement of the various phases.
Okay.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Sashi Bhakta with the Bureau of Engineering. We are currently overseeing this project. A couple of reasons why we need the extension and have this firm on contract with us, because first of all, the project is being carried out in several phases, and they are the original engineer of record. So we have to maintain them on contract as we complete the project in phases. The phasing of it is basically driven by the funding that is available. So as the funding becomes available, project gets divided into phases, and that's when the projects are moved forward for the construction. So currently we have 4 entities working there to complete the project. One is the Department of Recreation Parks staff. We have 2 on-call contractors, Murray Construction Company and a commercial paving company, and also the Bureau of Sanitation. So we have 4 entities trying to complete part of the Prop 40 projects. And then thereafter, we have Prop 84, which is the Santa Monica Conservancy, that is going to be also taking next phase in line. But because of the funding, we don't have that. So as the project gets delayed, additional requirement comes on board, new codes, the old design that is almost 12-year-old design have to be updated, so every time we take on the phase. So to ensure the continuity of these things, we need to have this firm on contract continuously. And that's why we are asking for the supporting the extension of the contract.
Mr. Reyes?
Yeah, I'm just curious. When we fund projects, we work on budgets, and the budgets dictate what we can and can't do within a certain period of time, right? So are we saying that we want to explore other funding opportunities, and therefore we need a 5-year extension to allow for that? Is that what you're saying?
No, when the project had started, it started with the sort of a short funded. We have numerous funding source, and every time we take on a project, when you look at a 45-acre site, which is a landfill that was closed, and we are turning that into a sports complex, which is going to have soccer fields and baseball fields and landscaping. So when we take this thing on, these are done in phases. There are numerous funding sources, and each one of those funding sources is short funded, meaning that whatever the task that they are giving us, whatever the money that is available to us through that funding, that's what we accomplish.
So you want to keep the crew together for a 5-year period so that you keep that momentum going.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Not the best approach, but
Yeah, it's
given
gonna-
the financial circumstances, we don't have a choice.
Okay. Were any of the delays in getting this project done attributable to this contractor?
No.
Okay,
These are strictly scheduling based on the funding.
I see. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, Mr. Reyes, we'll
Thank you.
go ahead and approve this and move it forward. That brings us to item number 5.
Item number 5, this item is governed pursuant to Los Angeles Administrative Code Section 10.5A, in that it expires October 2nd and is last day for council action September 30th of this year, and it is scheduled for council on September 30th. CEO report relative to proposed concession agreement with Artis Andinas, Inc. for a Mexican-themed specialty retail business located at 634 North Main Street.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Claudia Aguilar with the CAO's office. Before you is a proposed contract from the Department of El Pueblo for a 5-year contract with Artes Andinas for a Mexican-themed specialty realty business in the Hamel building of the El Pueblo Monument with an additional 5-year term. The rent for the facility will be $3,500 a month in addition to 346 CAM. The rent is above market rate based on the RIG study that was performed to determine market rates at El Pueblo. The department released an RFP and received 3 respondents. The highest score was for Artes Andinas, and the commission awarded the contract, and now we are before you to ask for authority to execute a contract for a 5-year term.
Okay, thank you. Hi. I'm sorry. can
Diana
you
Martinez
introduce yourself?
Lilly, the Assistant General Manager of El Pueblo, here to answer any questions you have about the contract.
Okay, Mr. Reyes?
Yeah, was there any communication with the council office in regards to this particular contract and/or the process?
Yes, unfortunately, this has been delayed because of the Segueros interpretive project and also the leases negotiations. So it's been about 1.5 years that it's been pending, and we're on a tight timeline, but yes, it has. This is actually the same residents of Casa de Sousa.
Right.
And-
But let me ask you, let me be more specific. We did get the request from the chief of staff, from the council office, to review this and to continue it.
Mm-hmm.
But because of timeframes, if we don't act on this, it's deemed approved.
Right.
It has to move forward to council if we're going to act on this. So I'm trying to establish whether there was a communication between your office and the council office regarding this particular action today.
I don't believe, I'm not sure. I don't think so. Mr. Andrade is out today, but we've during the whole entire process, the RFP, we've communicated over the last, it's almost been 2 years. They had copies of the RFP, et cetera. The contract was a sample contract was attached to the RFP, so no, I haven't heard anything from CD14 regarding holding off on this matter. No, I'm sorry.
We just got the message today as well.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so we're trying to figure out where we're at, and,
Right.
and it's a little awkward right now because
Yeah.
we're learning this in the last second. So
Okay.
that's why it's critical to figure out, okay, did the council office, it's District 14's district,
Right.
and they've been working hand in hand with you regarding this whole
Oh, it's been a
process, this whole
long-
dynamic. We know how rigorous it's been.
Right.
So I'm a little taken aback that they didn't know about this
The
item.
Well, I think the way that I would suggest that we remedy that problem, because we are under a time constraint, and at the same time, you've apparently been working on this for an exorbitantly long time, which comes as kind of a shock to me in itself. But in order to avoid the automatic approval effect, Mr. Reyes, I would suggest that we move this forward, but instruct the general manager to consult with CD14 between now and the time that this comes to council about this specific contract, not just the RFP, but the specific contract, so that before council, CD14 has the opportunity to evaluate and weigh in more thoughtfully than they have right now. That's
Yes, I think that would address the
okay.
concern.
Okay.
All right, then
Thank
that, without objection, that will be the decision of this committee. And thank you both. For, oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I take it back because we do have a public comment card. So before we make that assessment, let's invite up to the microphone Magdalena Orantes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I am here, respectfully to ask the approval of the contract that we have. We are Artes Andinas, and we are waiting for this bless for a year and a half, and so we are ready to move on, please, if it's possible. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's
Thank you.
all.
Well, as I said, the judgment of this committee will be to move it forward to council. The only proviso will be that the general manager will consult with Mr. Huizar's office before the full council votes on it, but it will be moving forward today.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Before we move off of this topic, is this typical of the process, that it would take a year and a half to get a vendor approved?
I used to work for the
I'm
city
new
of
here.
California.
You
Me too.
understand?
I've been with the city for about 4 years, and I think it runs the gamut. But it is a
Is
lengthy
it something
process.
specific to El Pueblo, or is it?
Everything's specific to El
Yeah.
We have rules.
I think part of the what happened with contract that it got caught up with the merchant issues, so the department was really focused on getting the issue of the rents settled. So I think this one, unfortunately, got a little bit caught up in that process. So.
Mr. Chair, can I ask this question? Are there any others out there?
There's one more that we just released a report to the mayor's office this week. It's actually that W19 was split into 2 facilities. So the second half, which is Soto Alvarez, should be coming before you probably in the next month or so, depending on when we schedule it. But it's that we'll advise Mr. Andrade to bring up both contracts when he speaks with the council member this week.
And
That would be helpful. Thank you.
does that end all of does that close the loop, or do we still have stragglers out there?
Well, we have an RFP. I don't know if it has been released yet, but there are more coming.
Oh yes, yes.
How many more?
I
There
don't
we have
think we can go
several.
too much
Yeah,
further.
we
I'm
have
just
several vacant
curious.
spaces, and
10, 15, 20?
All right. As of this moment, I have no cards for public comment. So if there are none, I don't see any hands waving. Then, unless anybody else has anything for the good of the order, we can adjourn this meeting. Thank you all very much.